Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending the event and such great panelists. And also, I want to mention Richard on Zoom is with us. So, Hostage Aid Worldwide is a global organization, and so we have actually a global representation today of cases on Iran, Syria, and Venezuela. And Barry mentioned something in the previous panel, Barry Rosen, that the toll that the hostage-taking process takes on the families. And so this panel, the theme is really on that and the shared experiences and understanding sort of the difficulties that you all navigate. So I want to ask the first question, Giselle, let me start from you. What in those early stages when this happened, when the issue with your father happened, his kidnapping and hostage taking basically, how did you navigate those early stages? Did you get any government support? How did you decide to go public? Of course, in your case, I think it's a little bit different because the case was already public. And I want to ask this same question from everybody else. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Ali, for this question. I did not decide to go public with my dad's case. The Islamic regime decided to go public by kidnapping him and showing his kidnapping video and blindfolded, tortured to confessions in front of the whole world. We just took an American, German national, and you can't do anything about it. And so all I had to do for the first year is go against the propaganda that the regime put out, because as we just heard in the previous panel, how they're taking a hostage Evan to Russia, a journalist, and they're portraying him in the media with charges, espionage charges. Well, that's what they do with most people, but if you have actually been a critic of this regime for years and years, there's not just one story out against you to assassinate your character, to make you look like a bad person. There are billions of stories. So going against those stories, against that propaganda, took most of my time since these 3 years to even get the word out that my dad is not whatever the Islamic regime makes him out to be. He is a journalist, he is an activist, he is a father who was just kidnapped in front of the eyes of the world without anybody saying a peep. That was my first experience. Do you want me to?
Well, let me get
Sure.
back to you. Let me ask Deborah. So, Deborah, how about your case? How did you? When did you decide to go public with the case, and what type of government support did you receive on those early stages?
We were hugely blessed because we never had to make the decision about whether or not to go public. First of all, I want to make it really clear. Austin was not snatched. He was not hunted. They were not trying to get him. There was a series of unfortunate events where he fell into their possession. And so when he fell into their possession, our protecting power of a Felipe, the Czech ambassador in Damascus, was very keen to get Hillary Clinton agitated about getting Austin out of the possession of the Syrian government. And so there were things so appropriately called dip notes. Dip notes. Yeah, they're dip notes. So anyway, those were flying across the ocean. And nothing was happening. And Eva was very concerned about Austin. And so she went to Prague and she asked her newsman when she went on news TV to ask her about Austin Tice. And so that is how his situation was made known. The short story of how that worked out, it was August of 2012. There was a very tight election coming up in November, and Hillary was not going to do anything that could be judged. And so for her own political future, she decided to leave Austin there.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Let me go to Richard, ask this question from Richard. So tell us about that, Richard. What was the factors that you had to navigate about going public, and what kind of support did you get on that?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good evening. So we went public after about a month, which felt like a time. And Nazanin was taken; she was on holiday, and our daughter had her passport confiscated and was sent to her grandparents. So it was very disorienting and very scary. I was probably lucky that I met a number of other hostage families very early on. And they all had a different story. And as Anna Shea was saying in the video earlier, like, you can't really give advice to anyone to do. We all have to work it out for ourselves, and there are different circumstances. But every single person told me that in their own case, they wished they'd gone public earlier. Now that was a sample of 4 people I met, but it was persuasive. So I went public, and I think I just thought she was stuck in solitary confinement. I just wanted to break the isolation. It wasn't really any more strategic than that, and it was really feeling that whatever Iran was doing was crazy, and there must be something else going on, and speaking out could only make her safer. Over time, I think more of campaigning became about nudging the British government and creating political pressure to get them to do something. But in the very first instance, it was around just making noise to get her safe. And yeah, it did do that. Within a week of us publicising it, she had her first family visit. Within 2 weeks, she was out of solitary. Got put back in solitary later on. It wasn't a magic wand or anything. But it felt that sort of wave of people caring. Like, people can't help if they don't know you exist. And actually, it took a village to get all of us home in all these different cases. But a village can help if they know. Yeah.
And I will get back to you on the question of campaigns in a little bit, but let me go to Jose, because as a former hostage, you're on the other side of the story. And so could you share with us, of course, what your family was going through, but also were you aware of the efforts that were happening by your family, by the government, or any other entities?
Yeah, it's very interesting, this question, because as you said, it's the other side of the story. Our particular case, when this happened to us, really the first year we really was literally unaware what was going on, because really we were isolated. I remember Jorge is here, we were separated. I saw Jorge like 1 year after, 10 years, almost 1 year after. Even that we were got the same day, I saw him like 1 year after. I didn't know what was, even where he was. We were totally separated.
So you were separated into different sections?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I went to I was put in a place that they called the submarine. It's a vessel that was totally locked. We had no windows, no fresh air, no nothing. I was with Gustavo, one of my colleagues, and I stayed there like 10 months. When we were changed to the new place, is that I saw Jorge and the other guys. We had no clue they were. And we didn't have no clue what was going on in the world. We didn't have no clue what day was, because we lost the sense of time. And at some point we learned that the U.S. ambassador was expelled. So the situation was really, really, really bad. So after that, we learned that in that first year, our family was instructed by the government that they stay silent, that they were trying to negotiate behind the scenes. So the first year didn't happen nothing. And by that point, we already were having talking, because we were put together. And even though we were not in the same place, but we had the opportunity to have some talks. And we began to say, hey, I think this has to go public. But it was kind of surprising for us that our family already was thinking to do that. Before we went to them, they already had organized. And there was a guy that, I don't know where the guy appeared, but he was a pro bono guy that organized a campaign. And it was a real media campaign they launched. I remember we were always surprised, because we were getting information that their family was even going to the press almost every day. It was like a boom, boom, boom. And it began to create a lot of noise. And at some point, that's where created the name of the 606, appeared the name of the 606, because maybe for them was more easy say that instead of mentioning the six of us. So the situation, when you see the other side of the coin, you don't have no control of no situation, absolutely no control. In my case, at some point I began to smuggle a letter with my wife. We were receiving some food after 1 year, because the first year was terrible. Everybody lost tons and tons of, and I lost 100 pounds. And the other 15, 60, everybody was, you know. So when we began to receive some food, we decided to begin to smuggle letters and begin to have communication with our family. So there's where we learned that everything was going. And after some time, I don't know, 1 year and a half, I don't have the time. One day I remember that my wife, in one of the letters, she wrote me that they were having a meeting here with the U.S. government in Washington, and the day after there was going to be a gala with a foundation called the Foley Foundation. And that day I learned, because she read me, that there were Americans in Iran, in China. You know, we were not aware of the situation. We really thought that our case was unique. And we learned that day that this was something bigger. And when I came out, already I was aware about the situation, because our families, and one of the guys that was with us, his daughter was one of the creators of the Bring Our Family Home campaign. So we were aware that was going on something there. And at that point, at that time, we already were having better communication, and we heard that they were going to put the faces in the mural. So we heard there were things going on, sure, but no control. Everything was going without our control.
Yes. Great. Well, Deborah, so you've been campaigning for Austin for more than a decade now. So tell us about how your experiences sort of evolved through this time. What are things that you have learned through this process that can be shared with others that are going through this process? Also, speaking to government officials, did you have the sense that there is a coherent strategy, especially because of the time period that Austin's case has been taken, been multiple stakeholders, multiple officials, multiple governments, right? So yeah, please share that with us.
We've been through a lot. But you guys didn't bring any snacks, so you can't get the 11-year story. Bless your hearts. Well, you know, at the beginning, there wasn't all of this support and camaraderie. And I mean, thanks be to God, over and over and over again, forever, because we never had to make that hard decision. And so then after the election, and then people resettle in their offices, and that takes a while, and they have to figure out how the phones work, and you have about 3, 4, maybe max 6 to 9 months that you can get in there and work really hard, because our representatives have to get their jobs every other year. And so there's that time where they change offices and they learn how things work again. And then they have a time where they can work for you, and then they're campaigning again. And so you really have to be strategic to know, you know, that it's got to be March 3rd, and you've got to get in there and you've got to get after it. And then the government will have this, well, you're going to need to talk to the State Department, and the State Department will say, well, I think that's in your FBI purview. And so there's all this siloing, which the Hostage Recovery Fusion Cell was supposed to be a remedy for that, and now it's kind of fallen away from that, but it did work for a while. So we've seen a lot of changes in how things work. But I will tell you, that in 2011, there was a decision to shutter our embassy in Damascus. And then in 2014, while I was in Damascus, we shuttered the Syrian embassy in DC. And so we don't have a direct diplomatic channel to Syria. And nobody knows why we don't, but somebody decided to make that decision, and we may not know the bones of it, so we don't want to get into it and then find out we are making a bigger mess. And so everyone's just kind of going, ooh, right? And the Syrians don't have nuclears to motivate us to engage with them. They don't really have anything that we want. And so there is no really any reason. So they can always be backburnered. And that's where Austin is.
Thank you. So let me go to Richard. So Richard, could you talk about strategy and campaigning? What you went through on Nazanin's case, and what are sort of the silver linings of that experience?
Yeah, thank you, Ali. I think in our experience, it's a bit similar to Deborah's, in that I don't feel there was a strategy that the Foreign Office had. Candidly, I don't think any government I've watched in hostage cases has a particular long-term strategy. There were sort of windows of opportunity, and those were both, hedged by the domestic moment as to what was going on. In terms of when people were distracted with elections or when they were, actually interested in doing things, and also windows in the diplomatic relationship. And for the longest time, we probably weren't very aware of what those windows were. We came into it very naive. In simple terms, I think for us at the beginning, our strategy was to get Nazanin not forgotten, and to focus on people knowing who she was and caring about who she was. And that was a very human focus in the media. And through that, over time, making more political pressure on the government for its poor performance, for its, essentially its negligence in not getting her home. And we had at points had lots of political pressure, which ebbed and flowed. But I think at some point I realized that actually campaigning on our own wasn't enough. And it was really welcome, the initiative of Nazar and Hostage Aid, and connecting with the other families, and shifting the conversation essentially from a conversation about what's Nazanin doing in Iran to evoke the attention of her hostage takers, to being a conversation about what is the British government doing to protect its citizens, what is it doing with international allies to protect all of our citizens, and it being a conversation where the government sort of waiting and seeing approach was increasingly scrutinised. I would echo what's been said before, is that this is an area of foreign policy that is poorly understood, neglected, and really there's not much accountability for how little governments do and how poorly they do. So in the end, there is but in the end, it was those efforts that put real personal pressure on ministers for their failing to act, that got us the attention of the newspapers and the TV cameras, and that got then questions being asked government as to what they're doing. And it was, cumulative. There were sort of steps forwards and steps backwards. I don't think there was ever a strategy, but in the end, we made it transparent, the decision-making that the government was doing, and they made a different decision.
There's definitely a need for that kind of strategy. So, Giselle, so in your case, I'm going to actually use this as a segue to our next question and connect the campaign to also the difficulty of navigating all these issues while living your life and doing everything else that you have to do. And on top of that, now you have to run a full-time campaign. So specifically also tell me about how did you assess the risk of going public and campaigning? I mean, we know that it wasn't really your decision to go public, but campaigning hard about your father, given that he has sentence that is quite scary, right? So.
Yeah, there's really no time to think about it when they kidnap your dad and you know what they want to do with it. It was clear from the beginning that they want to murder my dad because they tried to assassinate him here on American soil in 2009. So that was not a question for us. What will happen? Will there be a court? Will there be a judge that is sympathetic to it? They made it clear from day one, we have your dad and we will kill him unless the governments do what we want them to do. So the risk assessment was like, my dad's gonna die if I don't do that. So from that moment forward, it was forgetting about that I was pregnant at that moment. I was 5 months pregnant, forgetting about being a mother, forgetting about my job as an ICU nurse in the middle of the pandemic, trying to save lives. I was not that anymore. I was now the campaign to trying to save one life, which was my dad's, and doing it in a way that would not endanger us too much, the other hostages, the people of Iran, and everything. That was what motivated us. But I really want to talk about what happened today, and I don't know if you're gonna ask me later. Okay, then okay, then I know I'm gonna explode with this right now because it's not, yeah. But going back to what Richard just said, having the support of other hostage families, that's what kept us going. I think within the first couple of days, Richard found us, reached out to us, told us everything that he knew. Nizar, like all of these people, like reached out, like found us, reached out to us, told us everything that we have to know, because you don't know, there is no handbook telling you what to do, where you can go, who's gonna help you. Why is everybody in the media reporting what the Islamic regime put out there instead of listening to the families who are telling them, this is a journalist who was just kidnapped, putting out ringleader detained, terrorist ringleader detained in Iran, and you're like, who is that terrorist ringleader, and why do they put my dad's picture next to him? And just seeing like, oh my God, the stuff that the Islamic regime puts out is copied one-to-one into our media, and nobody has the power to stop them. That was the most terrifying thing. Getting to our governments and not being acknowledged. It took me 3 years and sitting for 1 week with Shahab Dalili's family in front of the State Department to get to speak to the State Department. Not even Anthony Blinken, not even the president, not even anybody who can give us any answers. Just getting to a State Department took us all of this time. Meeting our foreign minister in Germany took us 3 years. She just came and met me yesterday, 2 days ago, in DC while we were campaigning here. Why would it take you so long? I'm an American citizen, I'm a German citizen, why can't I talk to my government? Why are they not giving me any answers? Why are they trying to tell us every single time, shh, be quiet. Don't call them hostages. Don't go to the media, that can endanger them. And families believe that. We have right now, as I said, 3 activists from Germany, UK, and US who were on TV in Iran, forced to confessions. Those are new hostages taken. Why are we told to be quiet? Why are they told to be quiet when every single hostage that you can ask right now that was released told us the moment the media attention came on, we were taken out of solitary confinement. We were taken out of wherever we were. We were released. My dad right now for 3 years is in solitary confinement being tortured. And right now we're waiting for his execution to be taken out. Yes. If they're not bringing him out, I don't think what's holding them back from killing my dad.
Thanks for that, sharing that. So, and we'll get also to the topic of today. But before that, Deborah, I want to ask you also about this issue of all these difficult decisions that you have to make, and how did you come up with a support system? Was that family support, or was that basically this notion of you have to keep campaigning until the government officials will respond to you? How much of that experience did you have to go through?
Well, this is just another thing where we were, not really knowing what day it was and which way was up, right? And in the very earliest weeks, we have 7 children. Austin is the oldest of our 7 children. And so at the very beginning, he was going to be home in a couple of weeks. And so we said, just do your thing, be yourselves, go forward, we'll take care of this. And that has been such a blessing because it's been 11 years. So now we have siblings that came out of high school that now have master's degrees and married and have children and have opened their own businesses. And none of that would have happened if I had chosen, and I would love to because they're very strong and helpful people. If I had leaned on them, they also would have lost 11 years, right? And so I'm really grateful. And so what came into that was Austin's connections with the Marines, with the Boy Scouts, with journalism, with Georgetown. That is where our support started flowing in. And people that work with me realize that I'm still pretty empty-headed and just kind of go, tell me what to do, blah, 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 just tell me what to do. Because I don't really know how all these things work. And
I'll be here.
I've only ever been just a mom. So I specialize in very clean white diapers and a pretty good chicken dumpling soup. And I'm really proud of that. And so it's been really hard for me to take on this lobbyist, dragon mother situation. I think Hugh could probably confirm that, when I say I'm going to be in DC next week, everyone starts planning to go out of town, So I feel really fortunate that it came about in that way.
Yeah, well, kudos to you, and kudos to you and your brother, and of course, Richard, for all the hard campaigning that you've done and continue to do in your cases. Jose, I want to ask you a slightly different question now, because again, as a former hostage, you are experiencing on the other side of the story. You have the experiences. How difficult was assimilating back into society, being away for such a long time, being away from family, not seeing the changes in your family, in your neighborhood, all of that you had missed during those times?
Well, this is a very nice question because when we came back in October 1st, we stayed 10 days in the military base in San Antonio. And that decompression process they call pizza, not a pizza, P-I-S-A, pizza. Okay, so I came back to my house October 11. October 12th, I did a first interview on TV because for some reason I was when I began to realize that all this situation was happening to others, I said, "Wow, Jose, you have to do something." So what's up? My personal decision, and 1 month after, I was in Georgetown in the mural. I remember that I told my wife that I wanted to do a quiet trip to take, some photo, and it began to be an event. It was an event. I remember that Neda, she hosted me in her house, and well, it became an event. And when I met all these families, I began to meet all these families. I remember I met the family of Luke Denman. That he was in the cell beside us. We saw him every day. When I met his father and his mother, I began to meet all this family. I said, "Wow, Jose, you had to do something." And since then I have been unstoppable. Sure. I decided to be unstoppable. Well, I decided to go unstoppable. That doesn't mean that I've been going through situation because I went to a trauma center. I'm still having a therapist every week. I remember she telling me that, you're going to begin to have episodes 1 year after. I'm going to have 1 year in 2 weeks. So, but this is Jose Pereira. I decided to go vocal. Today I have a community in LinkedIn, in Facebook and Instagram. I do audio events. I try to educate people. I have a newsletter. So I decided to go vocal.
Yes,
because for me, this is something that has to be stopped. And the people doesn't know. Every time I talk about this, it's jaw-dropping. The people don't know the situation is happening here.
Exactly.
So I'm doing it in an organic way. I'm doing it by my own, trying to educate people. And I decided to do it that way because, I don't know why, but I decided to do it that way.
Well, great. Well, I'm glad you're back, and it's great that you're unstoppable. We need that. Yeah. Well, thanks for doing that. Yes.
Yeah. We need more
we're almost close to time, but I promised that we talk about today. So, of course, today's event, the exchange of the prisoners and the fact that your father was left behind, what are your reactions?
How much time do you have?
Well, give us the short version and then at the reception.
Let's start with that this was not an exchange of prisoners. On the one side, we have hostages, innocent hostages. On the other side, we have actual prisoners who did something wrong, who were in a real court, and should have been in prison. Let's start with just that. Freedom is one of the most important things. We stand for freedom in America. I'm happy for every single person that is free, every single hostage. Nobody deserves to be behind bars, even for a second, even for a second. But when we pick and choose which hostages deserve freedom, that is where the problem begins. That's not where it ends, because I have a lot more to say about what just happened here and how the media portrayed it. This day will forever, their freedom of these 5 people will forever be stained by the fact that Americans were at the same time abandoned. Americans like my dad, Americans like Shah Abdalili, Americans like Afshin Batani were abandoned by our administration without a clear explanation why. Why is it these 5? Why not the other 5? How do you pick and choose them? Why would you leave anybody behind in the first place when you're doing any kind of negotiations? It should be about all Americans. Why do you not acknowledge them? Why is it that on all the media right now today, all the media turned into campaign tools of the current administration or campaign tools against the administration? This is not a partisan issue. This is not about the Biden administration. This is not about anything like that. Media should not be a campaign tool. Hostages should not be campaign chips to be used. Media had the responsibility to give us the backstory of what's happening. None of them did that. I did not see one media outlet that talked about what is going on in this deal. First of all, when you're doing any kind of negotiations to free hostages, this is never in isolation. You cannot pretend you're operating in a vacuum. What you're doing to bring these hostages back, when you're leaving people behind, affects those people left behind. When you're leaving the only US national behind with a death sentence, you're pretty much signing his execution by doing that. You're pretty much saying, we don't care about this one. We had the chance to bring some people out. We choose the one that didn't have a death sentence. What you're doing is affecting my dad personally. What you're doing is putting him in harm's way. This has to be reflected when you're talking about this deal. This has to be reflected in the media and by our State Department, which failed to even talk about my father or Shah Abdalili or anybody else left behind. The message you're sending out with us is also a political message. It's not about my feelings or that it's my dad or anything. This is a political message when you're leaving the one hostage behind who was a victim of transnational repression here on US soil, who was almost murdered here on US soil, while we have other journalists that are also targets of the Islamic regime, while we have an entire administration who is fearing right now, who's under surveillance of the FBI, just like me, just like my family, not safe here because the Islamic terrorist regime is plotting their assassination here on US soil. This same people, the same administration that was plotted to be assassinated is right now in court with my dad, facing terrorist charges, just like my dad. None of the US media outlets reported about that, even though it was in all of the media inside of Iran. And failing to do so does not help the whole issue. It shows them it's okay to continue plotting against US officials over here. Second, This is not just about the Trump administration that is right now in court with my dad. Also, as we said, a European diplomat, Swedish citizen European diplomat that was working under Joseph Borrell, under the External Action Service on the JCPOA, so a friend, so to say, is right now a hostage in Iran. So it doesn't matter if you're against the regime or in favor of the regime. It doesn't matter if you put pressure or if you were trying to negotiate with them. They are all either hostages in Iran or trying to be assassinated over here. We have to find out, and we are owed an explanation, who the two hostages are, whose identities are still not revealed. First, it was said that they're not revealed to protect them. They're back now, as I understand. They're safe now. It is owed to us, to the Americans and to the families left behind, to know who replaced us in this deal. Why were they chosen over my dad, over Shahab Jalili, over Afshin? What criteria were they chosen that made them more important, not important as a human? Second, this is not just about the Trump administration that is right now in court with my dad. Also, as we said, a European diplomat, Swedish citizen European diplomat that was working under Joseph Borrell, under the External Action Service on the JCPOA, so a friend, so to say, is right now a hostage in Iran. So it doesn't matter if you're against the regime or in favor of the regime. It doesn't matter if you put pressure or if you were trying to negotiate with them. They are all either hostages in Iran or trying to be assassinated over here. We have to find out, and we are owed an explanation, who the two hostages are, whose identities are still not revealed. First, it was said that they're not revealed to protect them. They're back now, as I understand. They're safe now. It is owed to us, to the Americans and to the families left behind, to know who replaced us in this deal. Why were they chosen over my dad, over Shahab Jalili, over Afshin? What criteria were they chosen that made them more important, not important as a human being, more important and more urgent to bring them back right now, as opposed to my dad who was left behind? One more point that I want to make is about our secretary, Blinken, who reminded us today of Bob Levinson, and that the Islamic regime were not made accountable for Bob Levinson's death. Well, Bob Levinson was a patriot, just like my dad, who was left behind in a deal, and who did not survive that. So instead of trying to use his name as a statement for whatever you were just doing, why don't you explain to us why you are just now creating another Bob Levinson by leaving my dad behind to die? So we're repeating that over and over again. The last thing, and I swear I'm going to be done, is that we need an international global task force to include all of the hostages. I'm not just mad that the Americans were left behind. There are also dozens of Europeans that were left behind. Right now, we saw Nahid Tarabi's daughter, Mariam Klaren, who is advocating in Germany, because my dad is also a German citizen, for us over there. There are dozens of people over there. All of these countries have the same problem. And if each country tries to do their own little negotiations with the Islamic regime, they will blackmail us and they will get out of this much more than we are getting out of this. But if we have a global campaign that puts pressure on the regime and all of these countries work together strategically, then none of the hostages are left behind, and hostage taking is exactly, whatever the word, stopped, or at least not encouraged.
Yes, one question, and more power to you.
Sorry.
Okay, I have a question over there. Could somebody get the mic to them? And if you can introduce yourself, please.
Hi there. Can you hear me through this? Jimmy Quinn with National Review. So Gazelle, what do you make of the fact that President Raisi is here in New York right now? He met with journalists today. He has all of these meetings planned. He's going to be at the Council on Foreign Relations. What's your response to that as all of this goes down and your dad remains in Iran?
What a coincidence, right? It's all coincidences that he is here right now. It's also a coincidence that the $6 billion were just released in the same week that was the anniversary of the death of Gina Mahsa Amini. This is, of course, a joke. None of these are coincidences. I think this is all part of the plan, all part of the negotiations to have him come here, and probably was part of it. Like, there is a reason why he was allowed to come, and previously they were not allowed to come. It adds insult to injury that we have right now. hostages are left to die, and the hostage takers are invited here and given a big podium to speak. People in Iran right now, this last week on the revolution, were beaten again, kicked, silenced with all of this pressure, and we're giving this regime billions of dollars. With our administration keeps saying, this is their money. We're not giving them their money. This is the money of my dad. This is my money. This is the money of the people who are being killed in the streets right now. This is not the money of President Raisi. I wouldn't even call him the president. They call him the butcher of Iran. This is not the money of the people who took us hostage. This is not the money of the terrorists that tried to assassinate us over here. But we're handing the terrorists the money to put more people behind bars. And we're telling the people a different story. This makes me crazy, and I can't go further into that without getting out of the PG-13 thing right here. It is horrific what is happening, to give a mass murderer a stage while we hostages are told to be quiet. It is horrific to legitimize this regime that is terrorizing us and leaving my dad behind to die, because we know that the regime has no more reason to keep him alive right now.
We have time for one more question.
One more question. Does anyone have any other questions?
Maybe, are there any online? Okay, well, let's thank our panelists again, and also Richard Ratcliffe is online at a late hour.